Let's stay on the issue of records. You've got a new ad up in South Carolina taking direct aim at Senator Santorum. You call him a corporate lobbyist, a Washington insider with a record of betrayal. You also call him corrupt in that ad. Senator Santorum is standing right here. Are you willing to stand by those charges and explain them?
Well, it was a quote. Somebody did make a survey, and I think he came out as one of the top corrupt individuals because he took so much money from the lobbyists. But the whole... There it goes again.
They caught you not telling the truth, Ron.
But what really counts is his record. I mean, he's a big government, big spending individual because, you know, he preached the fact that he wanted a balanced budget amendment but voted to raise the debt to 5 times. So he is a big government person. And we as Republicans know something about right to work. He voted against right to work. He voted along with No Child Left Behind to double, you know, the size of the Department of Education. And he also voted for a prescription drug program. So he's a big government person, along with him being very associated with the lobbyists and taking a lot of funds. And also, where did he make his living afterwards? I mean, he became a high-powered lobbyist in Washington, D.C., and he's done quite well. We checked out Newt on his income. I think we ought to find out how much money he's made from the lobbyists as well.
A lot of charges there, Senator.
Yeah, I was going to say, do I have 20 minutes to answer these?
Take your time.
Let's talk about the corruption issue. The group that called me corrupt was a group called CREW. If you haven't been sued by CREW, you're conservative. CREW is this left-wing organization that puts out a list every election of the top Republicans who have tough races and calls them all corrupt because they take contributions from PACs. It's a ridiculous charge, and you should know better than to cite George Soros-like organizations to say that they're corrupt. So that's number one. Ron, I'm a conservative. I'm not a libertarian. I believe in some government. I do believe that government has, that as a senator from Pennsylvania, that I had a responsibility to go out there and represent the interests of my state. And that's what I did to make sure that Pennsylvania was able, in formulas and other things, to get its fair share of money back. I don't apologize for that any more than you did when you earmarked things and did things when you were a congressman in Texas. As far as the money that I received, you know, I think I'm known in this race, and I was known in Washington, D.C. as a cause guy. I am a cause guy. I care deeply about this country and about the causes that make me, that I think are at the core of this country. And when I left the United States Senate, I got involved in causes that I believe in. I went and worked at the Ethics and Public Policy Center and wrote on the cause of Iran, and wrote and lectured all over this country. I got involved with a healthcare company. Why? Because I was afraid of what was going to happen, and I was asked by a healthcare company to be on their board of directors. Now, I don't know whether you think board of directors are lobbyists. They're not. That's the private sector experience that I'm sure that Mitt would approve of. I also worked for a coal company. As I mentioned the other day, my grandfather was a coal miner. I grew up in the coal region. And when I left the United States Senate, one of the big issues on the table was cap and trade and global warming, and I wanted to stay involved in the fray. So I contacted a local coal company from my area, and I said,
well, you know, it is true. I believe Congress should designate how the money should be spent. I agree with that. But the big difference between the way I voted and the senator voted is I always voted against the spending. I voted against all the spending. There's only been a couple appropriations bills I voted for in the past, 26 years I've been in Washington. So you're a big spender. That's all there is to it. You're a big government conservative. And you don't vote for, you know, right to work and these very important things. And that's what weakens the economy. So to say you're a conservative, I think, is a stretch. But you've convinced a lot of people of it. But somebody has to point out your record.
I wanted to bring in Governor Perry on this. We'll stay on this subject. Don't worry about it.
That American people are looking for. That is what Americans are looking for, an outsider that is not corrupted by the process.
So, Governor, you're saying Congressman Paul is an insider?
I am telling you, anybody that has had as many, I mean, here's what frustrates me, is that you go get the earmarks and then you vote against the bill. Now, I don't know what they call that in other places, but Congressman Paul in Texas, we call that hypocrisy.
Well, I call it being a constitutionalist because I believe we should earmark or designate every penny. You designate weapon systems. You designate money to go to spend $1 billion on an embassy in Iraq. That's an earmark too. I say that Congress has more responsibility. But this thing, back to Senator Santorum, he ducks behind this. He's for this balanced budget amendment, but voted 5 times to increase the national debt by trillions of dollars. This is what the whole Tea Party movement is about. Quit. I mean, government's practically stopped at over increasing the national debt. You did it 5 times. So what's your excuse for that? That's trillions of dollars. You kept this thing going. You didn't do very much to slow it up when you had a chance.
Let's go to you, Speaker Gingrich. Recently, Dr. Paul referred to you as a chicken hawk because you didn't serve. Given what you just heard Governor Perry say about understanding the military and Dr. Paul's comments, how do you respond?
Well, Dr. Paul makes a lot of comments. It's part of his style. My father served 27 years in the Army in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. I grew up in a military family moving around the world. Since 1979, I've spent 32 years working, starting with the Army's Training and Doctrine Command. I was the longest-serving teacher in the senior military for 23 years. I served in the Defense Policy Board. But let me say something about veterans, because as an Army brat whose family was deeply engaged, I feel for veterans. We had a great meeting today in Wolfboro with veterans, and I made a commitment in New Hampshire that we would reopen the hospital in Manchester. We would develop a new clinic in the North Country using telecommunications, and we would provide a system where veterans could go to their local doctor or their local hospital. The idea that a veteran in the North Country in midwinter has to go all the way to Boston is absolutely, totally, fundamentally wrong. And I would say, as an Army brat who watched his mother, his sisters, and his father for 27 years, I have a pretty good sense of what military families and veterans families need.
Congressman Paul, would you say that again? Would you use that phrase again?
Yeah, I think people who don't serve when they could and they get 3 or 4 or even 5 deferments aren't. They have no right to send our kids off to war and not be even against the wars that we have. I'm trying to stop the wars, but at least, I went when they called me up. But, the veterans problem is a big one. We have hundreds of thousands coming back from these wars that were undeclared, they were unnecessary, they haven't been won, they're unwinnable. We have hundreds of thousands looking for care. And we have an epidemic of suicide coming back. And so many have, if you add up all the contractors and all the wars going on in Afghanistan and in Iraq, we've lost 8,500 Americans and severe injuries over 40,000. And these are undeclared wars. So Rick keeps saying you don't want this libertarian stuff, but what I'm talking about, I don't bring up the word, you do, but I talk about the Constitution. Constitution has rules, and I don't like it when we send our kids off to fight these wars, and when those individuals didn't go themselves, and then come up and when they're asked, they say, oh, I don't think one person could have made a difference. I have a pet peeve that annoys me to a great deal, because when I see these young men coming back, my heart weeps for them.
Speaker Gingrich.
Well, Dr. Paul has a long history of saying things that are inaccurate and false. The fact is, I never asked for deferment. I was married with a child. It was never a question. My father was, in fact, serving in Vietnam in the Mekong Delta at the time he's referring to. I think I have a pretty good idea of what it's like as a family to worry about your father getting killed, and I personally resent the kind of comments and aspersions he routinely makes without accurate information and then just slurs people with.
I need one quick follow-up. When I was drafting, I was married and had 2 kids, and I went.
I wasn't eligible for the draft. I wasn't eligible for the draft.
Congressman Paul, while we're on the subject of the Speaker has said that you've had a history of inaccurate statements. There has been quite a bit of controversy over this newsletter that went out under your name. A number of comments that were perceived as racist, as inaccurate. You said that even though they were written under your name, that you didn't necessarily know they were written, you don't necessarily stand by them. Can you really take the time now and explain to everybody what happened there, how it was possible that those kind of comments went out under your name without you knowing about it?
It's been explained many times, and there were things written 20 years ago approximately that I did not write. So concentrating on something that was written 20 years ago that I didn't write, is diverting the attention from most of the important issues. But the inference is obvious that, and you even bring up the word racial overtones. More importantly, you ought to ask me what my relationship is for racial relationships. And one of my heroes is Martin Luther King, because he practiced the libertarian principle of peaceful resistance and peaceful civil disobedience, as did Rosa Parks did. But also, I'm the only one up here and the only one in the Democratic Party that understands true racism in this country. It's in the judicial system, and it has to do with enforcing the drug laws. Look at the percentages. The percentage of people who use drugs are about the same with blacks and whites, and yet the blacks are arrested way disproportionately. They're prosecuted in prison way disproportionately. They get the death penalty way disproportionately. How many times have you seen a white rich person get the electric chair or get execution? But poor minorities have an injustice, and they have an injustice in war as well, because the minorities suffer more. Even with a draft, they suffer definitely more, and without a draft, they're suffering disproportionately. If we truly want to be concerned about racism, you ought to look at a few of those issues and look at the drug laws, which are being so unfairly enforced.
Diane Sawyer, George Stephanopoulos, and WMUR-TV's Josh McKelvin.
Back in Manchester, Governor Romney, I want to go straight to you. Senator Santorum has been very clear in his belief that the Supreme Court was wrong when it decided that a right to privacy was embedded in the Constitution. And following from that, he believes that states have the right to ban contraception. Now, I should add that he said he's not recommending that states do that. Well, I'll be clear. Absolutely, I'm giving you your due.
We're talking about 10th Amendment and the right of states
to act. But I do want to get to that core question. Governor Romney, do you believe that states have the right to ban contraception, or is that trumped by a constitutional right to privacy?
To ban contraception. So you're asking, given the fact that there's no state that wants to do so, and I don't know of any candidate that wants to do so, you're asking, could it constitutionally be done? We can ask our constitutionalist here.
I'm sure Congressman Paul.
Okay, come on back.
Do you believe that states have that right or not?
He mentioned my name.
Go ahead.
I didn't know whether I got time when it was favorable or not, but thank you. No, I think the Fourth Amendment is very clear. It's explicit in our privacy. You can't go into anybody's house and look at what they have or their papers or any private things without a search warrant. This is why the Patriot Act is wrong, because you have a right of privacy by the Fourth Amendment. As far as selling contraceptives, the Interstate Commerce Clause protects this, because the Interstate Commerce Clause was originally written not to impede trade between the states, but it was written to facilitate trade between the states. So if it's not illegal to import birth control pills from one state to the next, it would be legal to sell birth control pills in that state.
Senator Santorum?
What's the question?
The question, Governor Paul, Congressman Paul, let me bring this to you. You're running here in the Republican primary, but you haven't promised to support the party's nominee in November, and you refuse to rule out running as a third-party candidate if you fail to get the nomination. Why not rule that out?
Well, I essentially have. It's just that I don't like absolutes, like I will never do something. But no.
Never vote for a debt ceiling.
Please don't interrupt me.
Just
So I have said it in the last go-around. I said they asked me that about 30 times. I think maybe you've asked me 4 or 5 already, and the answer is always the same. No, I have no plans to do it. I don't intend to do it, and somebody pushed me a little bit harder, and I said, why don't you plan to do it? I says, I don't want to, so I have no intention, but I don't know why a person can't reserve a judgment and see how things turn out. In many ways, I see the other candidates as very honorable people, but I sometimes disagree with their approach to government, and I'd like to see some changes. I want to see changes where they're talking about a little bit of a difference in foreign policy, an interest in the Federal Reserve, a change in the monetary policy. We haven't heard one minute of talk about cutting any spending. He's talked previously about cutting the military spending. That's cutting proposed increases. This is why I have proposed that we cut a whole $1 trillion the first year. If we're serious as Republicans and conservatives, we have to cut. So I want to put as much pressure on them as I can. But besides, I'm doing pretty well. You know, third wasn't too bad. I wasn't too far behind it. Doing pretty well. Catching up on Mitt every single day.
Governor